Hello, and welcome back to another pseudo live stream on René Guénon's Perspectives on Initiation. It's been a while since my first upload, and I will spare you the long version of the story. The short version is I've tried to film this next episode multiple times, and we had technical difficulties. So this is certainly not my first read-through of the preface, which is what we're diving into today, but I still think there's value, even though I feel like I have somewhat of a decent handle on what's going on in the preface. I feel like if I still go through sentence by sentence and upload it, it will hopefully have some value. But ultimately, you guys are the ones who are going to have to decide. So, so I'm saying it's a pseudo live stream because I'm not editing this. It's not being posted as a live stream, but I'm just going through it on my own. Is there anything else I want to say before we dive in? I'm Sarah. I'm just a stay-at-home mom who loves learning, and I came across this book a couple years back. A friend recommended it to a couple of the chapters, and I just was so intrigued by the book itself. And because the language is quite dense, it's very... it's not like... If you're talking about, like, school reading levels, this is not, like, a middle school reading level. This is, like, a collegiate reading level. And it's been a while since I've dived into such texts, and I feel like talking it out sentence by sentence helps me understand and practice those comprehension chops. And I'm hoping that by uploading it, I've got a little bit of accountability to get through the whole book. And also, I'm hoping that it has some value to you, the viewer, that you can, practice this intellectual close reading chops that you may have yourself. So, without further ado, let's dive into the preface, which, from what I can tell, is actually written by Guénon. The editorial note we did last time was written by some editors. I don't know which groups of editors, this edition of the text has been edited multiple times. But the preface is written by Guénon. You'll notice the very first word he uses is we, and so he's talking the whole time in kind of the royal we. I don't know. I'm interested if anybody knows about French, which this was originally written in French, if that use of the kind of the plural we when you're just talking about yourself, is that a common thing in French, or was it back in the 1920s, 1930s when he was writing these? If you have any insight, let me know. But yeah, it says we, but I'm pretty sure this is just Guénon. So, first sentence. We have received repeated requests to select from the pages of the journal Études Traditionnelles those of our articles that bear directly on the theme of initiation, and to publish them together in one volume. Okay, so basically what he's saying is this Perspectives on Initiation book is a response to the repeated requests to take the articles that he's already has written in this journal, Études Traditionnelles, and put them together into one book. So he's probably written on lots of topics, but now and again he keeps coming back to the theme of initiation, and he's putting them into one volume here. It was not possible for us to satisfy these requests at once, for we are of the opinion that a book must be something more than a mere collection of articles. Okay, that makes sense. He didn't want to just have a collection of articles. He wanted it to be a book, and in his view, those are two different things. All the more so, in this case, as these particular articles were written at the inclination of the moment and often in answer to questions. So in this point he's saying, it would not only just be a collection of articles. There's maybe nothing... Apart from the theme of initiation, there's maybe nothing that could really tie these together. They were written at the inclination of the moment. They're in answer to probably specific questions, and so does that really lend itself to a whole book, is maybe the scruples that he's talking about he had as he was contemplating putting together this book. We had therefore first to revise, complete, and arrange them differently, and that is what we have done here. Okay, so he turned it into a whole book, and he had to go through this whole process of revising, completing, and arranging them into something that could be a whole book. We have not, however, wanted to make of this a more or less complete and, as it were, didactic treatise. Okay, so this is where I'm going to want to look at some definitions. I'm going to be using, I think, mostly just Google maybe a little bit of Wiktionary to look up words. And I want to say as a caveat, if you're going to look up any word, really in any dictionary, you're going to come up across, this is what the authors of the dictionary feels like this word means. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the word, that's how the author themselves is using the word, especially because we're dealing with translations. So Guénon was writing in French, and someone translated it into English, and that English word and a definition I might look up of that English word, like hopefully that matches Guénon's usage. But again, we're dealing with multiple layers of transition. So all that is to say, if you look up a word in a dictionary, it's not the end all be all, but it often has value because it can point you in a right direction. Even if it's not like exactly how Guénon is using the word, it can still help you kind of get at what is hopefully a common understanding of the word that gets you in the right direction. So let's look up the word didactic. That's not a word that I use in my normal parlance. So let's try Wiktionary because we're already here. We're going to look up didactic. See what we get. Okay, it comes from the French, didactique. And okay, I think this first adjective definition is quite helpful. So the word didactic is instructive, an adjective that it means instructive or intended to teach or demonstrate, especially with regard to morality. Synonyms include educative, instructive. Other definitions, excessively moralizing. Or in medicine, the word didactic can mean teaching from textbooks rather than laboratory demonstration or clinical application. Okay, I think number 3 is not particularly relevant to our discussion here, but numbers 1 and 2, that it's the didactic treatise. A treatise is like a type of writing. The didactic treatise is not what he was going for here. He's not trying to like overly moralize in his writings about initiation, I guess is what we could say. And so not just didactic, he's not trying to be like, he's not trying to like tell you what you should do, I think is what he's saying. And also he's not trying to be entirely comprehensive. It's not, he has not wanted to make a more or less complete, and as it were, didactic treatise. So he's like, basically he's going to, in this next couple of sentences, talk about how it's almost impossible to be exhaustive on the subject. And then he's going to talk a little bit about how he's not trying to be didactic. I think the impression that I get is that Guénon's writings have been, controversial is probably too strong of a word, but that there's been ascribed to Guénon the idea that because of the subjects he was talking about and in the manner in which he was talking about them, he was trying to promote one version of morality over another, and he very clearly in this preface is trying to say that's not what he's doing. So let's go into that. Again, I've got a little bit of I've been through this before, so I can remember, I kind of have like a look into the future of what's coming in this paragraph. Okay, such a thing might be conceivable if it were strictly necessary and involved only the study of one particular form of initiation. And by such a thing, he's referring to the maybe being complete and maybe doing a didactic treatise. But since on the contrary, we are here dealing with initiation in general, it would amount to an altogether impossible task, for an indefinite number of questions could be raised. Okay, so here he's really dealing with that issue. Let's clean up our highlights a bit. He's dealing with that issue of that he's not trying to make a complete treatise. He's basically saying it would be an impossible task because here we're dealing with initiation in general. We're not talking about just one particular form. We're talking about the whole topic. And when you're talking about the whole topic, an indefinite, meaning like without definition, that means like there's no boundaries on the number. Goes on forever. An infinite could be another word you use there. An indefinite number of questions could be raised. the very nature of the subject resisting any set limit. So he's saying it's basically impossible to be what's the word? Exhaustive on the subject, because the subject itself resists a set limit. So you can't exhaust. Okay, let's finish out the sentence. So that there could not be the slightest pretension of having treated them all. Yeah, that just, you can't even pretend to treat all of the potential aspects of initiation. It's too broad a subject. In the end, all that one can do is to examine certain aspects, to look at them from certain points of view, which, even if their importance is immediately evident, still leave out many others equally worthy of consideration. Yeah, so he's saying here what we're going to be doing is we're going to examine certain aspects. We're going to look at them from certain points. But even while we do that, and you can see that it's immediately evident that the certain aspects we're looking at are important, we're still going to leave out many other equally worthy elements out of our consideration. It's impossible to be exhaustive, I think is what he's getting at. Next sentence. This is why we thought that the word perspectives would best characterize the content of the present work. The more so because even with respect to the questions treated, it is no doubt impossible to completely exhaust a single one of them. Yes, that's why he's using, the title of the work is Perspectives on Initiation, as opposed to, a grand analysis of initiation, or any other number of words. Perspectives hints at that. That we're going to talk about certain aspects. We're going to leave out many other equally worthy aspects, but there's still value in the endeavor, even though we're leaving some things out. Okay. It also goes without saying that we could not repeat here what we have already said on the same subject in other books, but must rest content to refer the reader back to these books whenever necessary. Okay, so he's saying, I'm not going to repeat myself on this, and I've talked about initiation in other books, and I'm not going to repeat what I've said in those other books here. Okay, let's finish out the sentence. Moreover, in the order of ideas with which all our writings are concerned, everything is linked together in such a way that it would be impossible to proceed otherwise. Okay, so here I think he's saying he's not going to repeat himself, not just because he's talked about it in the other book and he can just refer you to the other book, but if he starts trying to repeat himself in one thing, everything is so linked together that if you tried to repeat what you had said previously, you would have to repeat everything because it's so linked together. You wouldn't be able to make any progress. You would just be stuck, examining everything and being stuck on one topic because everything's so linked together. Okay. Just going to throw out there, I'm feeling so self-conscious in this live stream. I'm still pretty new at this, and so if you're sensing that from me, I just want to have the caveat, you're not wrong. But let's keep going anyways, because the point of this whole exercise is to grow, and I won't grow if I don't keep at it. Okay, new paragraph. We have just said that our intention is essentially to treat questions which concern initiation in general. It must therefore be understood that when we refer to this or that specific initiatic form, we are doing so as an example only, so as to specify and better explain what might remain vague without the help of these particular cases. Okay, this makes sense to me. So he said we just made the point that we're going to be talking about initiation in general. So don't be confused when we start referring to specific initiatic forms. The only reason we're doing that is because when you talk about a specific form, it helps to explain and specify what might remain vague if you are only talking about the general. So sometimes diving into a specific helps explain an aspect of the general, I think is what he's saying here. So, hang on, let's clean up our notes. Apologies for the loud sounds outside. It's definitely a helicopter flying overhead. Okay. It is important to stress this, especially where Western forms are concerned, in order to avoid any kind of ambiguity or misunderstanding. If we refer to these forms so frequently, it is because the illustrations we can derive from them often seem to be more easily accessible to the general reader than others, as these forms are already familiar to many. Okay, let's stop there. So he's saying the specific forms that he might bring up are often Western forms, and he's doing that because the illustrations you get from them seem to be more easily accessible to the general reader. When I was first going through this, I had a question here thinking, okay, when he was writing this in the 1920s, 1930s, he felt that these forms, these Western forms, were more easily accessible to the general reader. And I'm wondering if that holds true today. Christianity has gone through a lot of changes in the past 100 years. And so I'm just interested to see, I've born and raised and am a Christian. And so I'm wondering, are these Western forms going to be familiar or more accessible to me? Or has Christianity changed so much that this itself doesn't hold? The social, kind of like the general social understanding of religion has changed a lot. And so will this aspect remain true today? Are they still familiar, or are they not? Okay, and it should be clear that this is entirely independent of what one may think of the present state of the organizations in which these initiatic forms are conserved and practiced. So, I think what he's saying here is, if he talks about a specific Western form, he is making no claims about whether or not the organization in which those forms are conserved and practiced. He's making no claims about whether that's like the organization is good or bad, whether the organization is true or false, whether the organization is good at their job or bad at their job. He's saying, even if I'm referencing a specific Western form, let's say like of the Catholic Church, just as an example, he's making no claims as to whether or not Catholicism or the Catholic Church in general is one thing or another. He's making no, it's not an endorsement. It's not what's the opposite of an endorsement? A non-endorsement? It's neither. He's just saying, I'm using a specific form. Don't extrapolate that into whether or what I may think of the organization the form came from. When we realize the degree of degeneration of the modern West, it is only too easy to understand that many things of a traditional order, and all the more so of the initiatic order, could scarcely subsist there except as vestiges largely misunderstood by the very people charged with their safekeeping. Okay, this is when he's getting a little spicy. So he's saying, but we're gonna kind of harp on these organizations. The modern West has degenerated to such a degree that many things of tradition and initiatic, many of these orders, these I think by order he's talking about, like we talk about like a religious man taking orders, that like it's a let's use our dictionary. Okay. We're going to have to dig a little bit. Okay, so order can mean all kinds of things. Wow, we've got lots of definitions. An order is an arrangement, disposition, or sequence. An order is a position in an arrangement. An order is the state of being well arranged. An order is conformity with, not going to be able to highlight that, conformity with law or decorum. An order is a command. An order is a request for some product or service. Okay, here we go. This one, number 7, I think is the definition we want to go for. Oh, come on. Highlight for me, will ya? A group of religious adherents, especially monks or nuns, set apart within their religion by adherence to a particular rule or set of principles. So, and the example is St. Ignatius Loyola founded the Jesuit order in 1537. So the Jesuit order is an example. So I think this gets us at what we're trying to understand when he says things of a traditional order. So it's not necessarily a formal group, but it's like a thing that is bound by particular rules or sets of principles. So traditional order would be an order that is bound by particular rules or set of principles. An initiatic order would be a specific order that has particular rules and sets of principles. Clear as mud? That's what I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling like we're clear as mud. In my head, it's making more sense, but I don't think it's coming out of my mouth. So what can we do except dive in even more? Explaining stuff is difficult, especially when you're just trying to do it to I'm sitting here with an empty room and just a microphone recording and my screen being recorded. Anyways, let's keep at it. Let's push through the difficulty. Let's read through the sentence again. Let me clear up my highlights and let's take another running dive at the sentence. When we realize the degree of degeneration of the modern West, it is only too easy to understand that many things of a traditional order, and all the more so of the initiatic order, could scarcely subsist there, except as vestiges largely misunderstood by the very people charged with their safekeeping. Okay, so there's been such degeneration in the modern West that things of a traditional order, things of an initiatic order even more, are barely alive. They scarcely subsist, except as vestiges largely misunderstood by the very people charged with their safekeeping. So, yeah, basically this is not a pretty picture of what's been happening in the West. Like, there were these, and obviously this is my own take on it, but maybe we could phrase this as there were these like beautiful, valuable things that were of a traditional order, and even more so things of an initiatic order that the West has gone downhill so far that even the people charged with their safekeeping mostly misunderstand them and that they're barely alive, I think is what he's saying here. Not a positive view of what's happened. And it is just this that makes possible the appearance, alongside these authentic remnants, of the numerous counterfeits upon which we have already had occasion to remark. So I think what he's saying, this is that people charged with the safekeeping of the orders they largely misunderstand the orders, and those orders are scarcely subsistent. They're barely alive. And because of those circumstances, what has cropped up alongside the scarcely subsisting true orders are numerous counterfeits. For it is only in such conditions that they can deceive and be taken for what they are not. Yeah. So if you understand the opposite of this word here, if you understand the initiatic order, you understand the traditional order, when a counterfeit pops up, you are not going to be deceived. But if they're largely misunderstood, then the counterfeits, it's hard to tell the difference because you don't understand the real one. So why would you notice when there's a counterfeit? Yeah. Getting a little spicy here, Guénon. Little, sounds like you're not happy with the way things have gone. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. I'm just kind of enjoying the spiciness. However that may be, the traditional forms in themselves always remain independent of these contingencies. And we would add further that when we come to consider these same contingencies and speak not of initiatic forms, but of the state of initiatic and pseudo-initiatic organizations in the West today, we are stating facts with no other intention or concern than expressing the truth in this regard as disinterestedly as possible. Okay, we're going to stop there. So, yeah, so, that was a lot. I think what he's saying, he's like, it's almost like he's talking to me, like, just because you were excited about me getting spicy about, there's counterfeits cropping up, that the people charged with the safekeeping largely misunderstand, just in case you're getting excited about the spiciness, we just know I'm stating facts with no other intention or concern than expressing the truth as disinterestedly as possible. Yeah. Let's finish off the sentence. Just as we will treat everything else to be considered in the course of our study, from which each is free to draw the conclusions he finds appropriate. So yeah, now here, do you remember earlier he was talking about he wasn't going to be complete or didactic. Here we go. He didn't want to be exhaustive and didactic. I think we first were talking about that exhaustive, like you can't be totally complete when you're talking about initiation. And now he's diving into, he's not trying to be didactic. He's not trying to tell you that you must do or you must not do anything in particular. So let's keep going. We do not take it upon ourselves to maneuver anyone either toward or away from any organization whatsoever. Yeah, so he's saying, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Nor do we propose that anyone seek initiation either here or there, or refrain from doing so. Okay, so he's another way of saying, I'm not trying to tell you what to do when it comes to initiation. For this in no way concerns us and could never be our role. He doesn't view that as being his job. It's not his job to tell you to seek initiation or to steer you towards a specific organization. It's not his role. Some will perhaps be surprised that we insist on this point so strongly, and in truth such an emphasis is called for only by the incomprehension of so many of our contemporaries, as well as the dishonesty of far too many of them. Okay, so he's saying that, by circumstances, I have to really insist upon this point. Unfortunately, individuals, even coming from apparently quite opposite positions, have so often attributed to us all sorts of intentions we have never had, that we must take all necessary precautions in this regard. Though we dare not describe these as sufficient, for who can foresee everything that some people are capable of inventing. Yeah, so it sounds like Guénon's had some bad experiences, that people have ascribed or attributed to him all sorts of intentions that he never had, and he doesn't know if it's been from just incomprehension or dishonesty. Probably there's been both, but so he's going to insist pretty strongly that he's not trying to tell you that you should or shouldn't seek initiation. He's not trying to tell you one organization or another is true or not true. That's not his role. And he's insisting upon it strongly, it looks like because of bad experiences. And he knows that this insistence probably isn't going to be sufficient, because who can foresee everything that some people are capable of inventing? Now, for whether or not those contemporaries that he's kind of complaining about here, I don't know, are their statements valid or not? I don't know. I have some sympathy though with what he's saying here, because very often I've seen, and I mean, you probably have too, you watch a video on YouTube and you come away with it thinking one thing, and then you look in the comment section and you're like, did some of these people even watch the same video? Did they even watch the video? How is it possible that they watched the same thing and came away with such wildly different conclusions? And I think sometimes that's due to incomprehension, and sometimes it's due to dishonesty, and sometimes you can't know which it is, and sometimes it's obvious which it is. But yeah, just this is a problem that I see in my life too. So even though I don't know the specifics of what was happening to Guénon and whether or not his angst over not wanting to be attributed all sorts of intentions that he never had, whether that's valid or not. I have a great deal of sympathy for the problem itself. Okay, new paragraph. It should occasion no surprise, then, that we often elaborate on commonly held errors and confusion regarding the subject of initiation, for besides the clear benefit of dispelling them, it is precisely in noting them that we have frequently been led to see the necessity for a closer treatment of particular points that otherwise we would have thought self-evident or at most to require very little explanation. Okay, long sentence, but I think what he's saying is he is going to elaborate on commonly held errors. Obviously, it's helpful to elaborate on an error and to help clear up confusion. But he also has learned that when he does elaborate on commonly held errors, that he learns that while he notes the commonly held errors and then he's been led to see the necessity for a closer treatment. I think because as a writer or as a thinker, you might find some things self-evident or that you don't really need a lot of explanation. But when you dive into the commonly held errors that people have in responding to your work, you start to see, oh, what I thought was self-evident, what I thought was clear, actually needed a little help. So we're gonna help because there's it was like a blind spot, and so I'm gonna help clear up this blind spot because I thought it was obvious, but certain readers didn't. It is important to note that some of these errors are made not only by the profane or by pseudo-initiates, which would hardly be extraordinary, but also by members of authentically initiatic organizations who, in their respective circles, are counted among the Illuminati. Okay, so the sources of these errors, I think he's saying, come from two general categories. By the profane or by pseudo-initiates. Profane, I think here is like the opposite of sacred, meaning this isn't someone who's like of a religious order. This is someone from like the secular world who may or may not have any, or probably does not have any like authority or often like experience with initiatic subjects. Or by pseudo-initiates, meaning like fake initiates. And I think he's going to go on to talk about how in the secular world there are like pseudo-initiatic orders, like things that mimic true initiation but that come from the secular world. So the errors that come up in regarding the subject of initiation, the errors are made often by people in, maybe we could just say that like people in the secular world who don't have kind of like the background or the authority to talk about initiation. But then the other category is members of authentically initiatic organizations who are counted among the Illuminati, the illuminated, those who have, if you're the Illuminati, that comes from the Latin word, I think, of illuminated, and we use that word in English. Illuminated means that the light has been turned on. So maybe, other people are in the dark, but you're not in the dark. You can see clearly if you're one of the Illuminati. And so these people who are members of authentically initiatic organizations can also be the source of errors. It's not just those who have no understanding or background, but people who are counted among the wise, you could say. They're counted among those who have been given eyes to see. They also are the source of errors regarding the subject of initiation. This is perhaps one of the most striking proofs of the present state of degeneration to which we have, This is perhaps one of the most striking proofs of the present state of degeneration to which we have referred. And I'm guessing that this is specifically about that members of authentically initiatic organizations are also causing problems by their misunderstandings or through willful dishonesty, whichever we may see as he elaborates further. In this regard, we think that without too great a risk of its being interpreted in a distorted way, we can express our wish that among the representatives of these organizations, at least a few can be found for whom these present reflections will contribute to their knowledge of what initiation really is. Okay, so I think what he's saying so far is like, he's saying he's hoping, without, hopefully it's not too great a risk of its being interpreted wrong, that there are members of authentically initiatic organizations who are kind of muddying the waters. They're the originator of errors about initiation. He is hoping that there can alternatively be representatives of these organizations who basically like are capable of being taught, that the present reflections will contribute to their knowledge of what initiation really is. So there may be, if we're going really simplistic, we might be saying like bad members of authentically initiatic organizations are making errors. But he's hoping that other representatives, good guys, can be taught by his present reflections. Basically, by this book, they will be able to understand better what initiation is, and their knowledge will be contributed to by the present reflections. So he's not basically saying like that authentically initiatic organizations are just all corrupt. They're all lost. There's no hope. That he's hoping that there's a wish that there are people in these organizations who can grow, who have like, they haven't degenerated to such a degree that there's no hope, if that makes sense. I think clear as mud is like my mantra today. At the very least, if none of this is making sense, if it's only me that's getting any enlightenment out of going through this sentence by sentence, maybe this could be a soundtrack to help you fall asleep. There's just someone talking in the background, talking about something kind of maybe esoteric, dull, something, and it'll help you fall asleep. So, it's a win-win, right? Right. Okay, sorry. Continuing on the sentence. However, we do not entertain any more exaggerated hopes in this regard than we do for the overall possibilities of restoration that the West may yet possess. Okay, so he's not... Okay, so he has a wish. He has a wish that certain representatives can have their knowledge expanded based on the present reflections. But he's not exaggerated in his hopes in that regard. Still, while there are clearly some who are more deficient in genuine knowledge than in goodwill, such goodwill alone is not sufficient. Ooh, that's spicy. There are some... Okay, so if you're deficient in genuine knowledge, and you're more deficient in genuine knowledge than goodwill, that means like you have good intentions, but you're not very bright. And he's saying, even if there are those people who, have good intentions, but they're not very bright, we know that the good intentions, the goodwill, is not sufficient. For the question is really just how far their intellectual horizons can be extended, and whether they are qualified to pass from virtual to effective initiation. Yeah, so goodwill, in his view, is not sufficient. You have to be able to have your intellectual horizons be extended. And I don't know if this is like as a result from your intellectual horizons being extended, or if it's just an additional qualification you need, that you're qualified to pass from virtual to effective initiation. And virtual here isn't talking about like digital. We often use, I think, virtual, like virtual reality. You know what I'm talking about. Virtual often in 2025 means kind of like digital. It's not mechanical. It's not like tangible. But even in that definition, I think we're hinting at what it means here. Like an intangible initiation would be the opposite of an effective one. An effective one has real effects. Okay, yeah, I'm defining the word with the definition, with the word itself. An effective initiation is one that works. A virtual one is one that is just like it's like talking about it. It's like talking about initiation, but it doesn't actually initiate you, I think is what we're saying here. In any event, we can do no more than provide information from which those who are able may benefit to the extent that their dispositions and circumstances permit. Yeah, this is interesting. So it's kind of what I almost want to say is a pessimistic view of fellow humanity, and it's very likely, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have this view. It's very likely that if I were in his circumstances and had grown up and had the same experiences he had, I would have the same view. That my own background leads me to believe that people can benefit, like they can grow, and that it's not just to the extent that their dispositions and circumstances permit. A lot of it has to do with choice. Now, you may say that their circumstances and dispositions are going to affect whether or not they even think that is a choice, and so therefore will they even be able to benefit? That's true. But this is a more pessimistic view of the growth and ability to change, of people's ability to change than I myself hold. I kind of like it though. It's like a bit Puddleglum-ish, but maybe not without reason. I don't know. Puddleglum is often pessimistic because of things that like I feel like unreasonable to me. And I'm not saying Guénon here is unreasonable. It's just more pessimistic than my personal view of humanity and people's ability to change and grow. And maybe he's not saying that they can't change, but just that they probably won't because of their disposition and circumstances. So maybe we're not too far off. I just probably wouldn't phrase it this way myself if you were to ask me my opinion. Such people will certainly never be numerous, but as we have often said, it is not numbers that are important in things of this order. Okay, so again, we're diving into the fact that like probably most people won't change, but he thinks that numbers are that it's not numbers that are important, although a sufficient number must be present to properly constitute an initiatic organization. Okay, so numbers aren't everything, but you have to have some numbers to have an initiatic organization. Until now, the few experiments we know about have been attempted along these lines have for various reasons not developed far enough to allow any judgment of their results that might have been different had the circumstances been more favorable. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like he's speaking from experience, that from his experience, the numbers just have been small. You know, that will certainly never be numerous, the numbers of people who have benefited from like his, maybe not just his teachings on initiation, but maybe other people's teachings on initiation as well. Okay, new paragraph. It is quite clear that by its very nature, the modern ambiance is and always will be one of the principal obstacles in the initiatic domain, as in every other, to any attempt at a traditional restoration in the West. Okay, I totally agree with this. Like the modern ambiance, like even today, even 100 years later, the modern ambiance is one of like skepticism at, what do you call it? I think there's a large degree of skepticism about things of a religious nature. That there's this, I don't know, like almost like looking back at the past and like, look how fuddy-duddy and easy to pull the wool over their eyes our ancestors were, but clearly there was only corruption in religion, and any good they did was kind of like tangential, and that like this kind of ethos really has permeated the West, and that's a massive obstacle. It's a principal obstacle to any traditional restoration, because we kind of view the past traditions as bad, evil, as unhelpful, as foolish, any number of negative adjectives you could ascribe to those those past traditions. A lot of the modern ambiance is that they're foolishness. So of course that would be a massive obstacle in any attempt to restore those traditions. While it is true in principle that the initiatic domain, because of its closed character, should be safe from hostile external influences, the existing organizations have in fact long since permitted their entry, and certain breaches are now too wide to be easily repaired. Yeah, so the initiatic domain, he says, has a closed character, and that should provide some defense. It should be a little more safe from hostile external influences, but existing organizations have permitted the entry of hostile external influences, and now certain breaches are too wide to be easily repaired. Yeah. Ooh. For example, in adopting the administrative forms of secular governments, these organizations have opened themselves to hostile actions that otherwise would not have been effective and would simply have come to nothing. This is I don't know if I would understand this better if I lived at his time. So he's saying that that existing organizations, an example of one of the ways in which they've let in hostile external influences is their adoption of the administrative forms of secular governments. And therefore, they've opened themselves up to hostile actions that otherwise would not have been effective. I'm wondering if he's talking about administrative forms like democratic votes and things, like in secular governments, if you have, I don't know, I don't want to just make stuff up because I'm not sure what he means by the administrative forms. And I can imagine some things that if religious organizations adopted what a secular government does, that could open you up to hostile actions that otherwise would not have been effective and would simply have come to nothing. That if you try to pretend to be, if you're a religious organization trying to pretend to be a secular government or to, take on some of the aspects of secular government, then you also are taking on the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities of such a secular government. Where if you all just, stuck to your guns and said, no, we're not a secular government and we don't run like one, we don't operate like one, then you also are not taking on the vulnerabilities. You might have your own inherent vulnerabilities, but you're not taking on the vulnerabilities of a secular government. Such an imitation of the profane world constitutes, moreover, one of those inversions of normal relationships characteristics of the modern disorder. So I think what he's saying here is that a religious existing organization taking on the aspects of a secular government is an inversion of what the normal relationship should be. Maybe he's saying that the normal relationship should be secular governments adopting the forms of the religious organizations. I think that's what's going on here. And that he's saying that that inversion is characteristic of the modern disorder, that the modern challenges that religious organizations face. Today, one would have to be blind not to see the manifest consequences of this contamination, and yet we strongly doubt that many know their real cause. The mania for societies is so entrenched that most of our contemporaries are unable to conceive of the simple possibility of getting along without purely external forms. But for this reason, such tendencies are the very thing that must be resisted by anyone wishing to attempt an initiatic restoration on a truly secure foundation. Yeah, so I'm out of my depth here because I don't understand the context. So it sounds like that there is this thing, this mania for societies that is emblematic of the contamination in these religious organizations. And therefore, many of his contemporaries can't even imagine that you could get along without purely external forms. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to go into this later about like the external forms versus like the internal, like the observable forms versus the like the kind of forms that you catch. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, I think I'm just going to keep going. I'm out of my depth on this one. That's okay though, right? That's why we're doing this. Hopefully we'll understand more as we go through. Or we'll just forget about it and then we'll be fine too. Either way, it's a win-win. We're going for win-wins this episode, guys. But we will not go further with these preliminary reflections, for, let us repeat, it is not for us to actively intervene in attempts of this nature, for our only intention is to point out a course to those willing and able to so engage themselves. Yeah, so I think he's saying, like, he's not trying to start a movement, he's just trying to point out a course to those who are interested. Furthermore, our remarks are in no way limited in application to any particular initiatic form, for above all else, they pertain to the fundamental principles common to all initiation. He's not trying to single out any particular initiatic form. His remarks are directed to fundamental principles common to all initiation, of both East and West. Indeed, the essence and aim of initiation is always and everywhere the same, only its modalities differing as a result of adaptation to different times and places. This is an interesting claim, that initiation is the same everywhere, just its modalities differ, but the essence and aim is consistent. To which we hasten to add, in order to avoid misunderstanding, that adaptation is legitimate only when it shuns all innovation. That is the product of a merely individual caprice. Instead, as with traditional forms in general, initiation must always and unequivocally proceed from a non-human origin, lacking which it is in truth neither tradition nor initiation, but only one of those parodies so often encountered in the modern world that come from nothing and lead to nothing. Okay, wait. We gotta back up a bit. Let's do another running start at this section. We're gonna start at this paragraph, or this sentence starts, indeed. Indeed, the essence and aim of initiation is always and everywhere the same, only its modalities differing as a result of adaptation to different times and places. So initiation in its essence is the same in East and West. Probably he's also saying throughout time, just that the modalities of initiation will adapt themselves to different times and places. But we hasten to add, in order to avoid misunderstanding, that adaptation is legitimate only when it shuns all innovation. So, like, someone might be like, I'm changing this initiatic order, and it's just adapting to the new time and place. But what was really going on is individual caprice. Instead, as with traditional forms in general, initiation must always and unequivocally proceed from a non-human origin. So that the adaptations, if you're gonna change a form of initiation, it needs to proceed from a non-human origin, not just an individual saying, oh, I think this should be different, but from a non-human origin. I don't think he is going to go into what he means by non-human origin. If you were to like pin me down and make me guess, I would say like it needs to originate from like deity, from like it's like a revelation from on high that changes that guides the adaptation. Lacking which it is in truth neither tradition nor initiation, but only one of those parodies so often encountered in the modern world. Yeah, so he's saying that there's parodies in the modern world, parodies of initiation, like pseudo initiations that are neither tradition nor initiation, that they come from nothing and lead to nothing. Yeah, so initiation must proceed from a non-human origin. So if it comes from individual caprice, it comes from nothing and leads to nothing. It has no value, and so do not really represent anything but a pure and simple nothingness, if one may so express it, unless they be perhaps the unconscious instruments of something far worse. Okay, so there's the end of our preface. Let's finish out by just saying, what do we think is going on in this preface? I think he's talking about the challenges of turning a series of articles into a book. And some of the challenges that arise include the fact that it's really hard to be exhaustive of initiation. Let's pull up a note, shall we? Okay, so let's say challenges to turning articles into a book. And diving into what are the challenges? Some challenges are that it's difficult to be exhaustive. And also that he's I think the bulk of this is somewhat a rebuke of the modern West and its degeneration. That individuals in religious organizations who should know better don't. Oops, that's not how you spell no. That organizations have like inverted, I'm gonna say religious organizations. Spelling and capitalization we're not gonna panic over. They have inverted the relationship between themselves and the secular world. You know, he was talking about that religious organizations have adopted like the forms of they've adopted the administrative forms of secular governments, and that's an inversion of what they should be doing. That like there should be the secular should be adopting the religious, not the religious adopting the secular. And I think he's really connecting it to, because initiation does not come from an individual. And if religions also don't come from an individual, if individuals allow themselves to be corrupted by the secular, then that's a problem. Like you're allowing that which comes from nothing and leads to nothing to destroy that which is eternal, which has efficacy, which has value. So yeah, I think that's some of our notes from the preface, that we were talking about the challenges of turning a series of articles into a book, that it's difficult to be exhaustive, that the modern West has degenerated a lot and in some ways been asleep at the wheel, or maybe even more nefarious in its actions, and that initiation doesn't come from the individual. It has that non-human origin. So we'll have to see in coming live streams what he says more on these subjects, how he elaborates, how he dives deeper into these subjects, and what other aspects of initiation come in as well. Thanks for giving this a listen. Thanks for your patience with my discomfort and my challenges in trying to flex these muscles. I hope that you find some value in this endeavor, and hope that hope the very best for you. So long.